Nigeria is a harvest land yet to be fully explored. In spite of its many trials, it breeds giant sons and daughters who serve as interpreters to the country's uniqueness. We set forth at dawn to Abeokuta to meet an amazing African. Ake, here in Abeokuta, the Ogun state capital, southwest Nigeria, is significant to his foundation. Welcome to this episode of Amazing African. I'm Susan Ilian.
My dear fellow Ismites, I hereby decree this day a holiday for all our people. I also decree that the people's traditional festival of the New Yam, which marks the beginning of harvest, be now incorporated fully into Isma's National Day and celebrated at a simple ceremony.
Before seeing the face, many may consider this voice hard to place.
And our resolve to preserve such aspects as fully reflect the progressive image of our nation.
That's the voice of a man whose associates would describe as a teacher, playwright, novelist, memoirist, director, actor, family man, international statesman, activist, rebel, and rainmaker.
We're opposed to the senseless junketing around the universe when starvation makes its pitiless scribble on the faces of the peoples of the world.
Some others prefer to see him as the fitting jewel on the lion's crown. For his close friends and those in the literary world, he is simply referred to as Kongi, after one of his artistic creations.
Space is barren, idiot. Does that speech reflect the spirit of harvest? I want a speech which breathes the spirit of harvest. What has the moon to do with harvest? Or space? Void? Gulf? Well, only there is a sort of yawning void waiting to be filled.
Abeokuta, the capital town of the Egbas, is notable for many things. One of them, the popular Lomo Rock, which hosts tourists daily. The road to the tourist site runs through Itoku, which is known for the make and sales of agire.
My name is Wole Soyinka, and this is where I live.
That same town birthed Nigeria's first newspaper, Ìwé Ìròyìn fún àwọn Ẹ̀gbá àti Yorùbá. Remarkably, the first church in Nigeria, Cathedral Church of St. Peter's, sits in Ake. This same Ake, that is the palace of the Alake of Egbaland, is where Nigeria's oldest Bible sits. It's in this same Ake that Akinwande Oluwole, son of Soyinka, was born, now fondly called Wole Soyinka.
Professor Wole Soyinka, Akinlatu of Egbaland, that is a trailblazer, somebody who opens a new vista. He's a great son of Egbaland, and somebody who has put Ake on the world map. His epic work on Ake is a masterpiece any day.
Wole Soyinka is a global name, perhaps even a household name, which needs little to no introduction. This work is not introducing him, but rather celebrating him. As fondly called by all, Wole cut his teeth through the whetstone of his environment. The highest of his influences were his father, a clergy and school teacher, and his mother, whom he christened a wild Christian.
I was surprised when people say, how could you possibly give your mother a wild Christian? But then they didn't know her. Essay was what my childhood hearing, made out of the initials of my father, which was S.A. And so when his friends came along, essay, and so he became Essay in my mind. And he was a school teacher, and a bit of an intellectual, and I saw him as a kind of embodiment of an elegant, well-composed, well-written, well-thought-out essay. Now, my mother, she was wild. Yeah. When you talk about Christianity, hers was a really, really deep Christianity. She believed that everything that she did was the work of God, the instruction of God. She poured water in a glass, and a bit spilled over, and she would look and say, my hands are no longer as steady as they were. That's a punishment of God for something. And since I wasn't that much of a Christian, and she did her best to convert me, she beat the living shit out of me. And she was wild. She clobbered me and decided that I was going the way of the devil, and she was going to bring me back by hook or crook. And so I said, this woman is wild. So I call her wild Christian.
Then his paternal grandfather, who introduced him to the world of gods. He enjoyed the experience, which he credits for his flow of inspiration, even till adult life.
My grandfather was an out-and-out Orishaman, pagan, to use the Christian expression, pejorative expression, and I was very proud of him. And eventually he also fell under, the missionary zeal, which made me even more angry against Christianity, because that side, that traditional side of my upbringing, of my environment, was something which I valued enormously. I was drawn to it naturally. For me, it was more poetic, it was richer, more colorful, more mysterious. There was nothing left in mystery. It's been imparted to me through the stick, the attempt at conversion. But that side of my spirituality, if you like, came through my grandfather. And so that really shaped my sensibilities in many, many ways. My sense of myth, sense of community, etc., that came from my grandfather's side.
Next was his maternal uncle, whom he prefers to call Daudu, and his family. That man Daudu would be the father to Nigeria's Afro legend, Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and his mother, Olufunmilayo, a staunch human rights activist and the first Nigerian woman to drive a car. Mrs. Kuti was reputed to have engaged in a series of protests that led to the eviction of an Alake of Egbaland, who was said to have introduced policies that were not in favor of women. Erudition has been his forte even as a toddler. Second of 7 children, he challenged the system that denied him education on account of his age.
I got up one morning. I demanded my bath at the same time, ate, selected the clothing which I thought came closest to the uniforms I had seen, and I insisted on being dressed in them. I had marked down a number of books on my father's table, but did not yet remove them. I waited in the front room. When Tinu passed through with her escort, I let them leave the house, waited a few moments, then seized the books I had earlier selected and followed them. Both parents were still in the dining room. I followed at a discreet distance, so I was not noticed until we arrived at the infant school. I waited at the door, watched where my sister was seated, then went and climbed onto the bench near her. Only then did Auntie Lawanle, Tinu's escort for that day, see me. She let out a cry of alarm and asked me what I thought I was doing. I ignored her. The teachers heard the commotion and came into the room. I appeared to be everybody's object of fun. They looked at me, pointed, and they held their sides, rocked forwards and backwards with laughter. A man who appeared to be in charge of the infant section next came in. He was also our father's friend, and he came often to the house. I recognized him, and I was rather pleased that he was not laughing with the others. Instead, he stood in front of me and asked, have you come to keep your sister company? No, I said, I have come to school. Then he looked down at the books I had plucked from father's table. Aren't these your father's books? Yes, I said, I want to learn them. But you're not old enough, Wole. I am 3 years old. Lawanle cut in. 3 years old, Wo? Don't mind him, sir. He wouldn't be 3 until July. I am nearly 3. Anyway, I've come to school. I have books. He turned to the class teacher and he said, enter his name in the register.
From that point onward, his search for knowledge and excellence never abated, distinguishing himself at all levels of education, from elementary to secondary and tertiary education at the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, where in company of 6 other schoolmates, he founded the Pirates Confraternity in 1952. That was when he was 18 years of age. Maybe not many would know him as a Captain Blood. He later proceeded to the University of Leeds, England, where he obtained the honors degree in English literature with second-class upper division. His shot to national stardom came at age 24 with the publishing of his play The Swamp Dwellers in 1958, and then The Lion and the Jewel a year later. What arguably might be described as his step to international prominence and fame came in October of 1986, when he was named that year's winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, becoming the first African ever to accomplish such a feat. No other Nigerian had won it ever since. In that same year, he was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. In Nigeria, Soyinka is equally well known, particularly among the older generation, for the role he played during the 1964 Western Region election crisis. This earned him an arrest and detention for 2 months. This might be a teaser for what was to come. In 1967, the regime of General Yakubu Gowon imprisoned him over allegations of treason. That experience was one he would not forget in a hurry, but he seemed to have moved on, no bad blood held.
Forgiven? There was nothing to forgive. Well, I was bitter for some time. Yes, I was bitter by the fact that, not by my imprisonment, but by the form of imprisonment, that I wasn't allowed books, that I was kept in solitary confinement for 22 months out of a total of 27. I thought that was very inhuman, in which I was not until the very final days allowed even access to books or to humanity. I think human beings should not be treated like that. So I was bitter about that aspect. But about the man himself who put me in prison, do you know, many people don't know that after Gabon left office, he made efforts to reach me, because he also had discovered certain things. And then we met at a conference, which was organized by Ali Mazrui, I think. That was the first meeting. And we hit it on very well, and he joked, don't believe anything he says, because he's saying it because I once put him in prison. I said, no, you didn't put me in prison. You were just my landlord.
It same travail during the General Sani Abacha regime as military head of state. Because of his outspokenness, he was declared enemy of state and wanted, dead or alive. His escape out of Nigeria still remains a mystery to many.
My Egbe was on the pillion of a motorcycle. That's how I left the country. On the pillion of a motorcycle through the forest. Well, I'll tell you, I can tell you, it's not a secret. I've mentioned it in my memoirs. I, quote unquote, went out on a hunt. I disappeared into the bush, reappeared in, if we should talk about it, maybe that's it. I reappeared in Oyo, which is the gateway to my normal hunting grounds. I know all that area, Opaogun, Shaki, towards the border. And there was, I'd arranged in advance for a motorcycle team. And so we left through the forest. That's as egbetic as that, no more. Nothing beyond that. You have to go and watch Star Trek to see how people disappear or disappear. Me, I'm not a Star Trek person.
Before his escape, he assumed several personas, including that of Ahmed the Diamond Merchant, one of the many disguises during the anti-Abacha struggle. One side of Professor Soyinka that has made him quite prominent is activism. This is in the form of call for good governance, anti-corruption campaign, support for human rights, and the like. The battle that he started in the 60s, at close to 90 years, he's still fighting.
But this has been an internal demand for a number of years. And the more this society decays, the greater betrayals we encounter. Look at what happened. NSARS is just another manifestation of this novel. You know, it's something coming to the boil collectively and which has to be expunged if people are not to sort of implode among themselves. This society needs to be told some truths and told in some very harsh, rigorous way. And when I say society, I'm not talking about just government. I'm talking about a society which accepts, which has been programmed or which has programmed itself to accept the rape of children, the butchery of humanity for rituals, money rituals, the lynch mentality has become common. A society which actually permits a program of humanity, no other word for it. Northeast one day, 100 dead. Another, just come further south, 50. Schools, students, pupils are being butchered.
Hardly any Nigerian head of state he did not pick a bone with over poor governance and mismanagement, military or civilian.
However, I supported Buhari's drive against corruption 100%. Didn't just support it theoretically by mouth. I have worked with EFCC, assisted them in many, many aspects. I was a friend both to Ribadu when he was there, and Magu sought me out when he took office and asked if they could still count on me, and I said, absolutely. So certain programs of Buhari, and also he scored pretty reasonably well in terms of roadworks, transportation, for instance, railway program is very difficult to fault things like that. That's number one. Number two, along the way, Buhari spectacularly failed the nation. He failed also to act expeditiously to secure this nation. And I said it at the time. And I don't mind repeating ad nauseum that when the next round of elections came, I worked against his re-election. I met politicians, I met the leaders of the ruling party right up to the top, did my best to persuade them to field somebody else. So this business of you support somebody, it's true, I have described him, and I believe that sincerely, by the way. I think he's a genuine reformed Democrat, but I'm afraid he's an incompetent one. And what's the point of being transformed if you cannot back it up with efficient action in that respect? So I have never been happy about Buhari's re-election, and if the leaders of that party had listened to me, they would have found somebody else who was acceptable and who maybe, just maybe, could have taken us out of this rut.
Who is down to earth? How about illusions? I need no illusions. I control lives. Control lives. Tell me, what does that mean? Oh man! Oh man! You shut up.
Professor Soyinka has over 24 plays, novels, autobiographies, hundreds of essays, poetry collections, 2 films, and an album of satiric songs. His latest prose work is the Chronicles from the Land of the Happiest People. The book mirrors the everyday life of a Nigerian. Like many of his other works, it satirizes religious and political manipulations.
Well, the title, is meant to be, is deliberate. it's a negative title. It doesn't really talk about the happiest people. It has no intention of it being the happiest people. But now, I'm glad you mentioned the title, because how do ideas for a creative work come into being? Sometimes it's just something somebody said. But somebody says that thing in a particular context, and so it strikes you very forcibly. And I came across this is at least close to 10 years ago, a piece of news where Nigeria was rated as the second happiest people in the world. I was aghast. I said, who are these people? Where do they live? I mean, which Nigeria are they talking about? So there's a deliberate irony about, oh, well, look at the happiest people. Let's just see what constitutes their happiness. But also, we have a habit of swallowing bile in this nation.
Though born and raised in a Christian home, he would later pitch his spiritual tent differently. So are his views to life and death.
Oh, that's easily answered. I don't believe in any afterlife. I think that we're just deceiving ourselves and making ourselves happy, looking forward towards something. After death, that's it. But I believe in continuity. In other words, this is what makes sense of life, that you look at life not as the phenomenon of an individual, but of a continuity of the species. And so we come in, a chain in that, a link, I beg your pardon, in that chain of continuity, and we pass the baton on to other people, and that's it. People say I'm an Ogun worshipper. No, Ogun for me is a metaphor. Ogun, and I reify Ogun from time to time when I say, oh, I'm with my companion, Ogun. Yes, I use expressions like that, and sometimes I actually feel like that. But I feel I'm one with the forces that Ogun represent, the force of creativity, the world of metallurgy, of poetry, and also, I'm sorry to say, combat. And I feel at home. I feel energized. And there will be no peace either in this nation or in the world until all the religions within the same borders learn to respect all other religions. You can quarrel with certain practices, you can quarrel with certain modalities. I'm amused, for instance, when, Muslims say, Orisha worshippers are bowing to carvings and so on, which is not true, by the way. The carvings which you see, which Orisha worshippers, use as caryatids, as they are meditative agencies, the same way as Roman Catholics bow before saints, the images of it. It's identical. And I fail to understand why people cannot see in a supreme deity as existing and presiding over humanity. No, there's no such entity. Nope. No. There's spirituality. Spirituality I've already described, of the sense of being one with phenomena, in which you lose yourself in phenomena, you meditate, etc. You collect yourself, you lose your being, etc. But to say I believe in an omnipotent deity, no, I don't believe in it.
Wole Soyinka is a family man. Having been raised in a closely knit family himself, he began his family at age 24 with his marriage to a fellow student at Leeds University, late Barbara Dixon, a British writer and multicultural educationist in 1958. That marriage produced Olaoku and Ilemake, his eldest sons. He would later marry to Olaideudu, a Nigerian librarian, in 1963, and later to Folake Doherty, a former student, in 1989. The Nobel laureate would rather not talk about his family, since according to him, I hate talking about my personal life. There's so much of one's life one lives publicly. When I get home, it's what I have left. He's a man with children and grandchildren about whom he doesn't like to talk, insisting In our tradition, we don't count our children. In my case, the gods have been kind, maybe over-generous. The saying that a prophet does not have honor in his home does not seem to have any bearing on the professor, as he's honored with a chieftaincy title, Akinlatun of Egbaland, by the Alake of Egbaland. The Ibrahim Babangida regime decorated him with Nigeria's second highest honor, Commander of the Federal Republic. The Italian government also honored him with the Italian Order of Merit Award in 1991. Besides the honor of the Nobel Prize, he has in his kitty a number of other national and international awards and prizes. At 88, he still looks striking. This he credits to unorthodox means. He enjoys the quiet of nature and his specially made pepper soup. He can be described as one of the very last of his generation in more ways than one, not only in literature, but also the values, the sense of fairness, beliefs, and culture, their affinity to hard work and discipline. All may appear to be leaving the scene along with them.
We hope you enjoyed watching this episode of Amazing Africans. What are your thoughts? If you feel you know an iconic African who should be celebrated, let us know by reaching out to the addresses showing on your screen. Till then, see you next time on another episode of Amazing Africans with me, Susan Ilian.